Good day to you, Grace Chapel. I'm Pastor Jeremy, and I have the privilege of giving you the 11th Advent devotional for us. And the title in our chapter is Joseph's Restraint. Now, this devotion from Sinclair Ferguson is quite unique. He draws out a great lesson for us that I had not thought of. And he starts off his chapter with Matthew chapter 1, 24 through 25, which says, "When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus." You see, Joseph and Mary were about to enjoy marriage, and when Mary found out that she was going to give birth to the Messiah, Joseph, like any one of us, started to freak out. And he goes to sleep, and an angel in a dream communicates to Joseph and comforting him and saying that Mary indeed had been faithful and that the child in her tummy was indeed the Messiah. So what does Joseph do? Well, he takes Mary as his wife and does not have sexual relations with her. Now talk about self-control. The wedding night is a very special night for a newly married couple. For Joseph and Mary, it must have been difficult, but they knew something even greater than intimacy was at work. Ferguson comments, Joseph and Mary had a higher goal in life than fulfilling their natural own desires. God had prepared them well for each other and for the Lord Jesus. What lessons can we take away from this obscure little detail in Matthew chapter 1? Well, first, the restraint of our good and God-given natural desires is not in itself sinful. When it comes to the context of sex within marriage, Ferguson suggests a great question to be asked. Well, what is the wise thing to do, and what will tend most to God's glory? Joseph likely knew that if he conjugated his marriage with Mary before she gave birth to the Messiah, that scandals and rumors would have run rampant. But their commitment to exercise self-control, even when they were married and totally allowed to have intimacy with each other, allowed the gospel writer Matthew to confidently state that this pregnancy had not been a result of Joseph. What great truth that we have here, all because Joseph and Mary chose to wait even after they were married. The second lesson is on Christian liberty. That's also at play here. Sinclair comments, there was nothing wrong with Mary and Joseph having normal sexual relations. After all, they were married, but there's nothing wrong with it was never the principle on which they acted. I remember years ago when I was a youth pastor and a student asked if they could begin smoking marijuana once it was legalized in our state. I asked him to ask God that question, and his eyes got so big. When it comes to Christian liberty, the phrase, "there's nothing wrong with it," should never be the principle that drives our decisions. When approached with a decision on whether or not to partake in a so-called gray area of life, Sinclair offers 4 questions to help with decision making. Number 1, is it helpful? Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 6:12a, "All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful." If it's not helpful, then why say yes to the event that you're contemplating? Number 2, will it enslave me? That verse continues, "All things are lawful for me," but Paul says, "I will not be dominated by anything." Paul avoided things in his life that had addictive tendencies because he did not want to be dominated by anything other than God's will for his life. Number 3, how will it affect others? Paul says in 1 Corinthians 8:9, "But take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak." The Corinthian church had a unique conundrum on their hands. Should they eat meat sacrificed to idols? Paul's answer is twofold. Well, yes, since idols aren't even real, but second, consider others. Will the eating of this meat cause someone to stumble? If so, then don't eat it. And that principle applies to us today. If exercising a certain liberty can cause a brother or sister to stumble, abstain from that for the sake of serving your fellow Christian sibling. Sinclair makes a great observation to those who might respond with a, "well, they need to get over it, I'm allowed to do what I want" type of attitude. He writes, "If I insist on exercising my Christian liberty, or worse, even flaunt it, I'm in danger of being in bondage to it. And if I insist on flaunting my liberty in the face of weaker brothers or sisters, then I'm certainly enslaved by it. It's not the mark of maturity I pretend it to be, but instead it's the reverse." Lastly, number 4, does it edify? Paul again writes in 1 Corinthians 10:23-24, All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Paul addresses Christian liberty with the consideration of others. Let us seek the good of those around us. Some fine men and women who have a lot to offer to the Christian community can become consumed with a hobby or travel that they have stopped edifying others. So let's choose to seek to build up one another by being involved in ministry, hospitality, and discipleship. In conclusion, Joseph and Mary teach us a valuable lesson on this 11th devotional for Advent. Let's ask this important question: how can we live wisely for the glory of God and the blessing of others? Asking this question will keep us away from sin and foolishness and keep us near the will of God. Ferguson closes, "I was taught as a child that joy is spelt Jesus first, others second, yourself last. And if you want to experience true joy this Christmas, then that's the place to start."